I have been playing Planet Zoo for over 4 years now, and I realized that I haven't really challenged myself. So I decided to do this series where I have to build habitats and exhibits for 116 animals based off what a wheel spinner tells me to do. I thought this would be a fun way to force myself to try new things and improve my creativity. Hope you enjoy. So I put all 116 animals in this wheel spinner, and as you can see, I got the mandrill as my very first animal. So I decided to do a tropical zoo based in Africa. I mainly chose this because of the color of the grass, and it's because in some of the other ones the grass can be like a weird color that isn't really the type of green that I wanted. Once I loaded in, I started marking my path and where I wanted things to be. I used black asphalt to mark where I'd want my future custom entrance to be once I had more funds. I continued the path to where the first habitat would be. I took a lot of time on this, and I erased it and I put some back because I generally wanted it to be like perfect. I placed the staff buildings down without the structure and the walls just to save some money for now. And I also hired a staff. I hired a caretaker, a keeper, a vet, and a mechanic, all the basics. I purchased and placed my male mandrill. I looked at all the stats and I took in consideration of the maturity and how much space they would need, climbing space, and I kind of don't build my habitat, the walls, based off of those stats. I kind of just build the general shape of how I'd want it and then see if I need to decrease it or increase the size of it. I decided to have like 4 mandrills total, 3 of which are going to be female, just to satisfy the social group. I may add more later, but for now that's what I'm going to do, just to satisfy the mandrills and wait till I kind of get more funds. The females were hard to find because there was none on the market, but I was also recording this really late at night, so that might factor in to the market as well. A lot of my habitats, I like having a body of water in them because I think it just makes it look a lot more realistic, and so I do make a body of water in this habitat. But as you can see, it took a really long time trying to decide on if the walls were perfect, if it made a good circle, if I should add the windows. But eventually I got to a point where I liked it and I was okay with it, and I placed my male mandrill. I started off by building up this mound in the back using the sculpt tools, and once I had a general shape of what I wanted, I started to smooth the whole thing out. After that, I created the space where the water was going to go, and I decided to use rough water over calm water because I realized I wanted to put a waterfall in, so the rough water would probably look best. Also, when I build, I become like super distracted all the time, and I try to do like everything at once. Like I try to add the enrichment and then the plants and then the feeding stations, and I just kind of skip around. I don't mind when I do that, but sometimes it really throws me off track, and then I kind of forget my idea of what I was gonna do. Luckily this didn't happen in that case, but I was just kind of looking at all the climbing because I've never really done any monkeys in my previous zoo. I kind of always skip over them because I don't know that much about the climbing, so this is honestly kind of perfect to start with because it really forced my hand to be more creative with it. After adding, I always use the built-in waterfalls and never the effects because I'm just generally not that good with it. Maybe in the future I'll try my best to make a custom waterfall with the rocks and everything, but for now I just kept it with the preset block waterfalls. I added some trees here to try to get an understanding of where I wanted the foliage to be and how it would cover up the space around it. I really love using big trees because from above it covers everything so perfectly, and I think it just looks so much better. I also try to add some color into my habitats. That was something I lacked a lot in my other builds. But one thing I always do, or as of recently, is I always add rocks to my builds because it makes things so much better and it doesn't take up coverage space for the animals, which allows me to put more plants in. I really like having the greenery pop in my builds. I I like to use like the base color rocks, especially the tropical ones. I think it just makes it look, it gives it a lot more contrast to the green grass that I wanted. Eventually I added some moss rocks. Yeah, here I had some moss rocks in, and this is actually something new I've been doing. I've never really used them. I never really before I never understood why they were in the game, because I just didn't like them. I just didn't like the color of them. But then as I started building more, I understood why I would use them more, and as I incorporated in my builds, I realized that it was a kind of like trust the process type thing, and I really like how it turned out at the end. Using rocks is, as I said, a newer thing that I've been doing, but I'll put some clips of my other builds where you can see that I use a lot of the rocks around the waterfalls, and I use a lot more greenery when I have the room to do so. I just really like doing that. It just makes the waterfall look so much more alive, in my opinion. By adding the rocks around the water, it really makes the body of water like a lot more defined, which I like. This is something new I learned by watching like YouTube videos. When I started a build, especially this one, I had no idea what I was going to do. But when I start, sometimes the creativity just like strikes me, and then I just kind of build then and there. Whatever works for me, and whatever I don't like, I just take away. But for those of you who are new to the game, don't be afraid to just like put things in and take them away. Not everything needs to be perfect first off. Like, you're still gonna learn and you're still gonna have a lot of imperfections, but just try it, and if you don't like it, take it away. But it makes it super easy to just be creative. Like, this is meant to be a creative game. I give a lot of credit to like all the YouTube videos I watch though. Like, watching other players like make their own, not even like videos where they like give you tips, just watching like playthroughs. It really helps you a lot because you pick up a lot of ideas and you just make them your own. Some of these people that I really truly learned from was like Eric the Dino and Paul's build. In my opinion, they have like some of the best like playthroughs and like little challenges that they do, especially Paul's build. He always does like certain challenges with the zoos, and I really love watching her year 1 to year 100 videos because it gives her a lot of ideas, and she's like forced to think on the spot, which I think is really good for these type of games. It also shows you how many building items there are. Like, that's something I always struggle with. Like, I don't use any of the building items, and so that's something I want to change in this, because it just takes a lot more time and a lot more thinking than building habitats, and I find that so hard. And the way that some of these people who play the game and have like so much more hours in the game and like 10 times better than me, they just use these building items like in ways that I would never think. But anyway, after adding rocks, I went in with the foliage, and I added a lot of plants around the water to start, but then I built outwards from it. I love using the apple cluster trees because I think they make such great bushes. The only downside to them is that they still count as trees, so they take up a lot more coverage. But I then started working on the terrain and making it how the mandrills would prefer. I always add sand on the water because it makes the water pop a lot more. I added soil to make the paths, especially where I think the mandrills would hang out more in like the feeding and climbing areas. I go in with the darker soil, and then I use the lighter soil to go around it to kind of create just that contrast, so it's just not all one type of soil or one type of grass, or it gave you the option, so I try to use them as best I can. I then went in with the enrichment, and I normally just scatter them around and like call it a day, but I'm trying to be better in this series, so I decided to figure out a way for me to make this enrichment like more useful and make it look better. So I decided to put these two enrichments on this little body of rock that I just built. I honestly, again, I had like no idea what I was doing. I just kind of built what I thought looked good, and the final product, I really love it. Towards the back, I added a main structure for them to climb on, because eventually I wanted to make a raised path for the guests to go and see the animals, because that's another thing I struggled a lot in my old zoos, is that the guests would always complain that there wasn't good enough viewing, because the animals would always hang around certain areas, and I just couldn't make it so that the guests could see them. So this time I'm trying to make it to where the animals would hang out in all places of the habitat, and the guests can see it from all places of the habitat. I decided to add some bedding up on the top just to make it more likely that the mandrills would go up there and sleep there, and so that the guests would have a better chance of seeing them. I also added some enrichment along the climbing structure, again, to maybe raise the chance that the mandrills would go up there. I then started adding plants to make those empty areas look more full. This is something I also struggled with a lot. I always had empty areas in my builds, and I didn't like them, and I just didn't know what to do with them. So this time I'm trying to figure out a way to incorporate a lot of the items that I would never normally use. Like, for example, this branch. Like, I would always ignore it because it was such a weird shape, but I decided to make it fit just to give it a little bit more creativity to it. But also, don't be afraid to use the big plants and their smaller versions of those plants to give it more depth. Like, these leaf litters are also really good space fillers. I added some more rocks to the hill I made, again just to fill the space, and then I added some enrichment on it to give it purpose. I also added some greenery around it. Here I copy pasted the rocks I just built to put it over here to again fill the space. Don't be afraid to like use the same build over and over. You can always like change it up a bit to make it look different, but using the same build over and over, it's not a bad thing. It's something you should again try to experiment with, and you honestly be surprised on like how helpful it is not to have to start everything from scratch. Here I added this little bridge so that to the hill from the climbing structure, just so the mandrills could access it easier and hopefully spend more time on it. I then decided to make rocks in the floor as if it were like pebbles or like little rocks, as if it like to mimic nature as much as I could. I used the smaller rocks for this, and I also used the aquatic rocks, which is included in one of the packs I own. I changed the color to give it more detail and to match the other rocks. I tried to best match the color with the tropical rocks I used, but it can be really hard to find that color. I just kind of eyeballed it, but it doesn't have to be perfect because the different types of color and the different types of brown that I used, I think it like makes it pop more, and gives it more color. I copy pasted the pebbles I had made around the area, and that's what I meant by like you can use the same builds over and over. Despite it being the same, I randomly rotate it and I adjust the height to make it look different. For the rocks that I used on the waterfall, I turned on the function where you can randomly rotate the rocks, just the rotation of it and not the height of it. By doing that, it creates like a more natural look to it rather than me turning it by myself over and over again. I then used more of the apple custard trees as bushes to fill in the empty areas, because I was kind of running out of ideas of what to do with these spaces, but I honestly feel like having more bushes and more greenery is something I needed in my builds. I would always just not do anything with the space, but I realized that adding more of these like small greenery and these rocks really brings the habitat together. And towards the back here, I used moss rocks as a space filler. I then added feeding enrichment on it to just give it a purpose. Later on, I was able to purchase some female mandrills. I only was able to grab 2, but I purchased the last female that I wanted to get off camera. I just kept circling through the trade center over and over, hopefully just to get as any mandrills I could get, because the shop really didn't have anything. This is me adding the extra path. I added the extra path for guests, and then I added the education boards, donation bins, and the trash bins. I think I want to change the color on the trash bins and the staff's uniform eventually. I'm just not too focused on that right now. I'm trying to make more money so that I can have more funds for these habitats. I also decided to put this world on hard, as I always do medium, and so I figured if I did hard it would also challenge me more. So I'm trying to conserve as much money as possible. And that's the final product. I really love how the waterfall turned out and how the greenery really makes it pop. This was a fun build for me, and it really forced me to use my creativity here. Anyway, thank you for watching. See you next episode with a new animal.